Okay, hello everybody. What I'm going to do here is take us through a kind of work through of the Lab 1 of the 08240 2D Computer Graphics module. And this is going to be the one where we build a Hello World application, just very simple starting point. So I'm going to take you through the steps as I go so that everybody knows what they're doing and what I intended for each of the tasks. So I've got the instructions open off screen, but I'll be working on the screen that you can see. On the right hand side I've docked Google Chrome with the index file open from my Lab 1 folder. At the moment it's blank because there's nothing in it. We haven't started the lab yet, but you can see the results of checking out the repository. I've got my Lab 1 folder open on the left here. That's this index file that we've got opening Chrome at the moment. So the first thing that it says we should do is open up our Notepad++ application. In fact, you don't really have to locate it so much because you can just right click on the file that you want to open in it and select Edit with Notepad++, which I'm going to do now. I'm going to dock that with the side of my screen as well. And let's also open up the Canvas.js file just so we've got it ready for when we need it. So I've opened up my file and we're going to start with the index file. So the first thing we need to do is add our doc type in there. So if we add doc type HTML, and then we can add our HTML tags, as that gives us something to start with. Everything has to go in between the HTML tags. So we're just going to add in some head tags as well so that we can add a title, like that. Okay, moving down, we're going to want a body as well. This is where the main content of the page is going to reside. And finally we'll put in our canvas tag, as this is what puts, getting ahead of myself. This is what puts in our canvas element on the page so that we can see what we're doing. Just went ahead and used single quotes there, but we use double quotes. Width, so we can specify the width and height of the canvas on our page, and then if we type in the tag, this is just a catch for any browsers that don't support the canvas tag, which won't be any new browsers anymore. It's pretty well established now. Let's add a little bit of text underneath so that we know what this is. Whoops. Oops. Again. Okay, so we go across and just press refresh. You can also just do F5 as well. Let's just put in our text that we just wrote at the moment. And there's a, oh, I think it's not showing our canvas because of I missed our tag at the end. and on the end of our width as well, as obviously the error is causing it not to display properly. Okay, that's curious. Maybe we'll turn up in a minute. Let's progress and see where we get to. Okay, so next, I'm going to want to add a script tag into our head section. This is where we add the link to our JavaScript file. So that's that. Just make that a little bit smaller so it all goes on the screen. Hopefully you can all see it still. So that gives us a link to our canvas file. Oh, there's our canvas is now the proper size. So next step, let's commit that to SVN. So if we open up our file again, you'll notice that the index file, which we've just been altering, has a little red exclamation mark over it. That shows that it's changed since the last version on the SVN repository. So we'll go down to commit here, add lab1, task 1, created the HTML5 canvas in our index. So okay, it goes ahead and commits itself. So that's now on the repository. If we just refresh, no, it's not going to do it, but it will do eventually. That'll turn into a green tick. Sometimes Explorer can be a bit slow with it, but that's fine. Okay, so a useful thing that we need to look at, it mentions here the browser debugger at the moment. So if I just do F12 whilst in the Chrome window, it'll open up your debugger down here at the side. If it isn't already open, then the one you're really interested in is the console here. And if there was an error in the code that we had, then it would show up down here. But there isn't at the moment. So let's press on. Just scrolling down on my instructions. So next bit. So next thing, we need to go to our canvas file. So this is the one that was in the JavaScript folder in our lab1 folder. So let's start adding some stuff to it. So the first instruction is we're going to be checking whether the browser supports the add event listener function. That comment is just to remind us what we're doing. So essentially what we're doing, having a little if statement here, and what it's doing is it's saying, is there a function in the window object called add event listener? And if there is, then we're going to use it in order to add an event listener. So let's use that function, window.add event listener. It takes 3 parameters. The first one is the event that we want to actually hook into, which is the load of the load event of the browser. So once the page is finished loading, this event is triggered. So whenever this event gets triggered, the next parameter is the name of the function that we want to be called when our event happens, and that is onload in this case, but in principle you could call it whatever you wanted. And then the last variable for the moment, we'll just ignore that. Okay, so now we've saved that. You can do Control S, or there are some buttons up here that you can press. Let's reload the window. Right, so if you notice now, we look down in the console of the Google Chrome window, you'll notice that onload, the function that we just defined over here in our code, is not defined. Or we said that we want this function to be called when the load event happens, but we haven't actually defined it yet. But you can see how the debugger is quite useful in this case. It shows us that the error is on line 4, which is here, which is where the error was. Okay, so let's fix that error. So the way to fix that is we need a function called onload. Note that JavaScript is case sensitive, so you need to make sure that you include the correct case for the onload, at least make it consistent. And also notice that one of the common errors that people make in this lab, which causes no error in the console error part, but it does just not work, is using the wrong brackets here. These are round brackets because it's the parameter call section of the function, just like in C#. Okay, so let's start adding some things to our onload. Okay, the first things we're going to need are a variable where we can get a handle on our canvas, and another variable called context, which is going to be connected to the 2D context of the canvas. So that's the actual part that we draw on. We're also going to need another function called initialize. Okay, so this is where we're going to set everything up in our canvas. So in order to try and speed this up a little bit, I'm going to omit some comments here, but it is useful for you to include them. So the first thing is we're going to need to get hold of the canvas from the HTML document. We do that using getElementById, and the ID in this case, if I just look back in the index file, you notice that we specified in the canvas the ID here, and that's what we're using to get hold of. So this is getting whatever the element is that we called canvas, that we gave an ID of canvas, and we're storing it in the variable that we declared there. Okay, so hopefully that went without a hitch, but we're going to just check to make sure that it did. So by calling if not canvas, then we're going to throw an alert message informing us that there was an error. Canvas not found. And then we can just return if that's the case, because we don't want to do anything else if we couldn't find the canvas. But if we did, then we'll drop through here. And next we want to try and get the context from the canvas. So first we're going to check whether there is a getContext. Method available, and if there isn't, then we're going to want to have another error. Oops. Or otherwise we just want to continue to actually get hold of the context. So context equals canvas.getContext, and we want to get the 2D context from the canvas. again, as with the previous canvas variable, we just want to check, whoops, not canvas, context this time, and we just want to check to make sure that it is actually there. Just using copy and paste here to make it slightly quicker. Okay, so we've reached a pretty handy milestone now. So I'm going to commit what we have. So we go back here, see that the canvas has changed. Notice also that the index has updated itself finally. So let's just select commit here. Added and onload. Oh, I forgot to add my nice tag. Lab1, task 2, added an onload function and initialize function to the canvas.js. Let's commit that. There we go, all done there. So if I press F5 now, oh, apparently we still have an error on canvas.js 4. Slightly different one this time. Okay, so let's go back to our file and look on line 4, and you'll notice that I've got a typo here on line 4. Add event listener, so let's add that correctly. Refresh our browser page. No more errors. Okay, so that's good. But we haven't got anything showing up yet because we haven't told it to draw anything. So let's add a draw function. Whoops, typo. Still typo, I'll get it right eventually. Draw. Okay, so inside we are going to want to set the fill style of the context. So what this is it's setting what color will be used when we call any fill functions. And for this one, I've just sort of suggested that you use black to start with. So what do we need next? Scrolling down in instructions. Okay, let's add a fill rectangle. So for this, we're giving it the coordinates of the top left, the width that we want it to be, so we want it to fill the whole canvas. Let's just do some nice white spacing here to make it a bit easier to read. So if we go across here, press refresh, oh, there's still nothing there. Actually, there's a reason for that, but we'll get to it in a moment. For the moment, let's finish the rest of our draw function. So we're setting the font now for the text that we want to draw. And we want it to be 40-point Calibri. We want to draw our text a different color from the rectangle, otherwise it's all going to look a bit weird. I've also noticed I've made a bit of a typo up there, so let's just correct that. And technically in JavaScript you can use either double quotes or single quotes. I tend to use single quotes in the text, but in any case it's useful to be consistent. You'll notice in the instructions that it's actually double quotes. I'll probably fix that in future years, but for the moment let's be consistent with the single quotes here. Okay, so the final thing we want to add into our draw function is the call to actually draw the text. So if we do context.fillText, give it the string we want, hello world, give it the position on the screen that we want it to draw at. And that's it, that's our entire draw function. So let's go across here, press refresh. You'll notice that there's nothing on there. That's perfectly normal. So if we go back to our code, what we've done so far is we've declared two functions, initialize and draw. But at the moment we haven't called them yet. So we need to add the actual calls to them down at the bottom here of the initialize, down at the bottom of the onload function. There we go. Other common errors that I've seen with people doing this is that sometimes they accidentally nest the draw function inside the initialize function, but you don't want to do that. So these are two separate functions, but they do sit inside the nest of the onload function here. So you've got your initialize and draw calls now. So now that I've saved that, if we go across, press refresh, and there it is, hello world, right in the middle there. Well, not exactly in the middle, that's a challenge for later. So let's commit that. It's always a good idea with when you're using SVN, you want to commit regularly, so it's lots of frequent small updates that you want to do. So this was lab 1 task 3. Added the draw function and called initialize and draw hello world showing. Okay, so you remember that in the lab we did in the lecture we started talking about vectors, and we really want to be using vectors for all of our positioning in this. So we're going to go ahead and add a vector object so that we can hold the position in it. So first thing to do is we'll go to our index file and add the link to our vector object that we're going to create. So I'm just doing a copy and paste here in order to make it a bit quicker. You can do the same as well. So if we refresh our browser window, error, file not found, JavaScript vector. So we haven't made it yet, but we're going to. So let's just quickly commit that index file. Whoops, wrong button there. Cancel. Let's commit our index file. I've just noted a slight mistake in the file there, which I'll correct, but for now this is lab 1 task 4, and we've added the link to the vector.js file. So the whole idea between the frequent small commits is that we allow ourselves to be much more adventurous in the code, because you know that you are only, a method away or a function away or a few minutes work away from going back to a previous working state. So you can be very adventurous with your code. So we want to start a new file because we're going to add our vector object. So you can either use the new file icon here, or you can also double click in the space there. That'll open up a new file too. So let's save that, even though there's nothing in it. Let's go to File, Save As. We want that in our JavaScript folder, vector.js. Save that. So now that's saved. Part of the good thing about saving it is that because it recognizes that it's a JavaScript file, it'll give us some pretty printing on the JavaScript text, so we kind of know what we're doing. Right, but now we've added that file, we're going to want to commit that as well, so we've got a place to start from. So you'll notice that this isn't version, there's nothing on there at the moment. So what you want to do is to right click on it, go down to Tortoise SVN, come across here to Add, click on the Add. So there are two steps to getting your new files onto your SVN. First is to add it, and the second is to commit it. So this is lab1 task 5, created vector.js. I suppose we might as well say that it's empty vector.js at the moment. Okay, there we go. So now we've got a blank vector file, so let's start putting stuff in it. So we want to declare our vector object. So there's a lot of what I'm going to call boilerplate code here. So this is just stuff that you need to have in order to make it work. For the moment, I'm not all that concerned that you know how it works. Just know that if you keep doing this, then you'll have a functioning object, and you can apply the same pattern to things that we're going to be doing in the future, like building a house object and all of the objects and stuff that you'll be expected to use inside your coursework as well. But basically speaking, this part here is the constructor, and this is what we can call to create our vector objects. So that's the first part. Let's just make that constructor. And let's commit that again, so we've got a nice safe place to go back to. Lab1 task 6, added blank can't type constructor to the vector object. Okay, so that commits. Back to the vector object. So we're going to want to add some getters and setters so that we can actually do something useful. So, oops, I meant for that to be a dot. Prototype kx Okay, so that's a little get function, so we can get the x property, so just using this notation here, m for member, as in member variable. And we're also going to want a setter function so that we can actually set it as well. Prototype set x. So using that notation again, p in this case stands for parameter, so it's a parameter of our function. It's a nice easy way of identifying where exactly the variable came from. Okay, so now we've got a setter for a px, and we're going to want to actually call that. So in our constructor, head up there, say setx, pass in the px function in the constructor, px parameter, sorry, into the constructor, and this is going to set our x variable. So we're obviously going to want one for the y as well, so let's just use a nice copy and paste here. Y, 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 and y. There we go. So that's basically what we want out of our vector object. So I've saved that. Let's go along and commit it as well. So lab1 task 7, added getters and setters for the x and coordinates of the vector object. Okay, right, what's next? Okay, so what we're going to do next is actually use a position vector in order to make our text appear in the right place. So the first thing we're going to do is add a variable position, p-position, and then in our hello world, instead of using these hard-coded numbers here, we're going to use that position variable to provide us, can't type again, so the position, the x component of our p-position vector and the y component of our p-position vector in order to position the hello world. So now that we've completed what we need to do in the draw function, we're just going to commit that again. So you may think we're doing a lot of sort of unnecessary commits, but like I mentioned before, it allows you to be sort of more adventurous with your coding. So what are we at? Task 8. Added p-position to draw function to allow us to change the position of the text using a vector. It's saying that no files were changed. I obviously haven't saved it from what I was typing. You notice that it's red there, so no, I haven't. I'll just save that. And okay, it looks like I'm going to have to start that again. So if I just say cancel, go back to File Manager, commit that, I can restore my last message, so I didn't lose the one I typed, which is quite a handy feature. And then I'm going to say OK, commit that. Okay, so if I refresh my lab here, you notice that I get this error. So at line 32 of the canvas, let me open that up again, which is this one, it's saying that there is no getX function in this undefined variable, and that is because despite the fact that we've included it here in our parameter, we haven't actually declared that parameter anywhere, so we haven't been able to use it. We certainly aren't passing it in our draw function. So the next step is to do that. So let's create a new variable up here. Let's call it text position. And then in the bottom of our initialize, we'll initialize it to a new vector. So text position was new vector. Put it back in the same place that it was before. And then the last step is to add it when we call our draw function. So we go back now and press refresh. Our hello world is back. But now it's interesting because it's held in place by the vector, so we can quite quickly change it. Let's say we want it at 250. Refresh it again, moves across, 100. See how the vector is now handling the position of the hello world text. Right, so now we've got to that stage, let's just commit it. So we're now positioned the hello world text using a vector. And that's basically it for Lab 1. I've left you with a challenge to try and position the hello world centrally in the canvas. I'm not going to do it for you because otherwise it wouldn't be a challenge. But I suggest you look into a context function called measure text, as that will give you some help in solving that problem in a nice, flexible, programmatic way. So obviously you could just work out exactly where the text position needs to be in order for it to be in the center, but you really want to do that programmatically so that it will be flexible wherever and however big your text is, however big the canvas is, it will always be in the center. So have a look at measure text, and for now, enjoy your Hello World, and welcome you again in Lab 2.